Hi everyone and welcome to another windy garden. It's coming from the other way this time though, so you just can't win. Today's video is all about raised beds and why they're a great idea for growing palms and other tropical plants here in the UK. Before I look at palms specifically, what are the main advantages to growing any kind of plant in a raised bed? Firstly, the big one, because they're raised up or at an angle, they actually attract more of the sun's heat, they warm up quicker in spring, and that heat stays with them longer into autumn. So essentially, with a raised bed, you get a longer growing season, which is really important. And secondly, they give better drainage. It's really important if you live somewhere with clay, waterlogged soil, to give your plants an extra bit of drainage. If you raise the soil up, it helps massively. And thirdly, I think the fact that you can build that raised bed out of whatever soil you want. So if you need a gritty, well-draining soil for growing agaves and succulents, it really is the best answer. So how does this apply to palms? Well, firstly, palm trees like Trachycarpus fortunei, they don't need the really sharp drainage, and they're actually quite easygoing plants that will take a lot of winter wet. But if you raise them up, they might start to struggle in summer when they actually need that moisture. So unless you live somewhere really waterlogged, I wouldn't worry about raising Trachycarpus up. However, when it comes to feather palms, like the Jubea behind me, that's currently in a bit of a half-complete raised bed, and probably a better example would be a Butea odorata. They really don't like sitting in cold, wet soil over winter. Now, they're both quite hardy palms in that they can take severe cold, down to say -7, -10 or so, maybe even more. But when you have that severe winter cold combined with a lot of wet, like we tend to have, especially in the north of the UK, it's a recipe for disaster really. They can have fungal problems, the roots can rot away, and they won't be as hardy as you might think. So by building a raised bed, it works in several different ways. Firstly, they've got the better drainage. You can put more grit in there, and the fact they're raised up means that that ground just won't be as wet as the ground around it. And secondly, because the ground warms up faster, you get a longer growing season. Now, you can't change the UK weather. We're never going to have the heat of somewhere like the middle of America. But what you can change is how quick that soil warms up and how long it stays warm through the season. At our old house, I had a Butea in the ground. It was a Butea eriaspatha, and it's one I brought with me to this new house. And what I did is I actually had that planted in a raised section of the border. It was only raised by about 30 centimetres, so around a foot, but I'm convinced that it led to the growth of that palm being so much better. And in fact, over the 2 years it was in the ground, it actually doubled in size, which is really impressive. And for me, that's purely because it warms up faster, it had that good drainage in winter, and it actually showed very little damage in winter. So I think from every perspective, if you've got a feather palm that's maybe borderline for your location, and you don't live somewhere with good drainage, it's 100% worth raising up that area or planting them into a raised bed. I won't show you too closely as I haven't started the weeding yet this year, but around the base of the Jubea, I've got a few small agaves. They're all Montana, there's an aloe, and there's different bromeliads and succulents that all need that good drainage. So in winter, they're not going to be sat in water. Plus, I've tried to angle a lot of the agaves so they're actually on the slope and that rainwater won't collect in them in winter. In addition to that, when there's a sunny day like today, you can imagine in the middle of summer, those summer evenings, they're going to be collecting all that heat, all the sun, and hopefully they'll grow as well as they can here. Some of those agaves get pretty big, so I'm really excited to see how they develop. In terms of how I'm using raised beds in my garden then, firstly there's a Jubea behind me, which it's basically planted in a mound, and I think it's important to make the mound a little bit bigger than you think. If you just have literally one plant with the soil raised up to it, potentially that can freeze through pretty quickly. So if you get a larger mound, it looks more natural and it'll help insulate those roots against winter cold. In addition to that, I'm building a sunken fire pit at that end of the garden, and around that will be more conventional sort of raised bed, which will probably be a block wall, maybe clad in stone or some kind of render. And then this way, I'm probably putting another feather palm, potentially another Jubea, in among some large rocks. So it'll hopefully look really impressive. I'm still working the idea out in my head, but essentially all three will be raised up and they should grow a lot better for it. If you're looking to build a raised bed in your garden this year, you don't just have to have a mound of earth or a pile of rocks with a plant chucked in the middle like me. There's a load of different options and potential to be really creative. You could use steel to make them, you could use gabions and maybe have a seat in the side, or you could use timber sleepers or some sort of sleepers on end. You can maybe have a traditional vegetable style raised bed, just use it for exotics. And when the plants are raised up, you'll find that if they're towering over you, you feel so much more immersed, and that tropical vibe is so much easier to create. And by the middle of summer, you'll feel like you're actually in a jungle. Another thing that I'll mention, in addition to palms, is that other exotics will really appreciate it as well. So if you look at cannas, hedychiums, that's your gingers, plants like that die down over winter and then grow back up in spring, they'll really appreciate that extra early summer warmth, the longer season, and being kept in dry means there's a lot better chance of getting them through winter, and hopefully they should flower earlier and more reliably in summer. So really, building raised beds, it's a win-win, both practically, for the plants, and just for the way it looks. Give it a try this year. Thanks for watching.